Well, what were we expecting? Were you expecting something different?
It's not on yet. Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah, it
it is. Yes.
is. It
Oh, yes,
is.
it
See?
is.
See?
Wow. Yes.
Shalom, everyone. This is Israel, my delight. Hey, question. Are police in the Bible?
Yes.
Are they there somewhere?
Yes.
Authorities? Security? Are they in the Bible? Well, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. So get your books, your Bibles, and open them to Romans 13. Whoa. And we'll be right back. Rahaba, Tohoda Rahaba, my heart is thankful to you, Abba. Tohoda Rahaba, Tohoda Rahaba, my heart is thankful to you. Well, shalom, everyone. This is Israel, my delight. Welcome to our Wednesday broadcast, and we're so happy to have you here tonight. As I said in the beginning of this show, do police in the Bible? And why do I say that? Why am I asking that question? Well, there's obviously been an uproar of police brutality and a bad cop doing a bad thing and killing a man, George Floyd, and then really bringing out an upheaval. And then it morphed into a defund the police kind of a thing. And, with the protests, with the people, the officials, politicians, all these different people talking about these things. Most of at least the politicians are not totally agreeing with it, but not really denying it either. But, should the police be defunded? Should we have police? Are they biblical? Are they here? Are they, do we need them? Well, these are questions for our time, and we see that this group, Black Lives Matter, is making an uproar and speaking about certain things and in terms of lives that are Black, yes, they matter very, very much. Caucasian, Asian, Hispanic, all lives matter. But it kind of stresses it on the Black lives, but yet, what about the abortion clinics? Don't babies matter? I don't know. It's just these questions to kind of grapple with in these times, these very strange times. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and the fear mongers are using that as a way of shutting down the economy, keeping us in homes, keeping us away from each other. But yet the protests happen, the riots, the looting happen, and there was not very much outcry. Why? Were these protests more important than continuing to spread a virus, if that's what's going to happen? It's just interesting thoughts. And then to come this week and basically have a movement now to defund the police. It was interesting. This is kind of an aside thing. I was watching as I was getting ready, and then we were watching a little bit of the Senate hearing. The Congress, congressional judicial hearing on the police brutality and the police matters and all that kind of stuff. And then I flipped it when you went up. I flipped it to C-SPAN for the Senate hearing, and what they were doing is they were interviewing, if you will, or some cases maybe persecuting a man who was nominated for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and uh, and he was actually a state senator in I think Texas, and before, and very conservative Republican, but the heat of battles when you're talking about thing. It was during the Obama days and Clinton as the Secretary of State, and he said some really powerful things in the heat of campaign, and everyone does. They all do. No one's innocent of it. But this one Senator Coons, I think from Delaware, I think, or Maryland, I'm not sure which, one of those two places. And he was, grilling this guy, saying, "Well, you said this, this, and this. How does that comply with, if people come in front of you as the judge on the court, how do they feel comfortable that you will make right decisions?" And he said, "Well, those are two separate things. In the heat of campaigning and the heat of that kind of stuff, politics, you do one thing, and then but the law is the law. The settled law is settled law. You don't go beyond what is written, because it has its process of going from the appellate, from the circuit courts to the appellate courts, and then it finally makes itself up to the Supreme Court of the United States. But I just thought that was a very interesting answer. He said, my opinion doesn't matter. It's where does the law take you? Where does the law take you? And so it's very, very, very interesting to that. So that just kind of made me think, and that kind of worked into this police thing, because I love the police. I'm always, I have to admit, I do get a little nervous when they're behind me and I'm driving. I'm thinking, oh boy, what did I do wrong? Is one of my lights out? Did I go a little bit too fast and didn't know it? And all these things go through your mind. I mean, hello. But they're here to protect us. I mean, they're the ones that are on the front line, doing the things that no one else does. While we were all hunkered down in the houses, they were out in the streets with their masks, responding to domestic violence things, responding to robberies, responding to whatever the calls came in, and they never know what's going to confront them. So I applaud them for what they do, because it's a calling. I mean, it really is a calling. Now, are there some bad police out there? Sure. Are there bad people everywhere? Sure. But you don't judge the whole with just a small fraction of who's out there. So, I just, want to know, I just want you to all know that I definitely, and you definitely support our men and women in blue. And we've had, in our town here, that, we don't know them per se, but we know them by face, a lot of them. We wave to them. We appreciate what they do. We actually have a couple of police officers that live, I think there's like 3 of them that live right within I don't know, 100 yards of us, so I'm very appreciative of what they do, and the sacrifices that they have to do by going out every morning and leaving their families, their husbands, their wives, their children, and not knowing what's going to confront them that day, and those that are left behind not knowing if they're going to see their loved ones alive again. Because I think last year or up I can't remember, but there's a lot of police officers, 40, 50 police officers that were killed in the line of duty. A lot of them were ambushed. A lot of them were, traffic stops. A lot of them were, again, domestic violence. And then all of a sudden, the one who was perpetrating the violence brings out guns and starts shooting, and all these different things. So, I just love our policemen and women that put themselves on the line every single day. Um, do we need some reforms? Sure, absolutely. But let's not, what do they say? I don't even like that. Throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, throw the bathwater out. Let's keep the baby.
Absolutely.
but it kind of brought me to Romans 13, and I just think it's something that's important to read, because I think you mentioned you might have heard one person in the news mention Romans 13.
That man.
Yeah, Jack Brewer, who was
Yes.
a former football NFL football player, and now he's retired, and he has a wonderful ministry, a strong believer, and if he mentioned, he would, if anyone that you said would have mentioned it,
It was
that
him.
would have been,
Yeah, it was him. Yeah.
that would have been the one,
Yes.
because he's quite a guy.
He knows the word, and he says we need to get the word out there more. He's very, very pro Bible. He's pro speaking the word. He believes that if more people read the word, spoke the word, and that things would change. And he says we're up against an evil battle. There's an
Yes.
evil battle that's taking place. It's not racial, it's evil.
Exactly.
And we have to face the facts. And yes.
So let's read some of actually, it's a short chapter. It's only 14 verses. So we're going to read the whole thing, because I think it's going to bring in some great insight. And I have right next to me my secret weapon. I call AviGayle my secret weapon, because she very much hears from the Father. So I appreciate that in her. But verse 1, chapter 13, it says, "Let every being." Now, before I start, think about this. This was written probably somewhere around 60 AD. I mean, think of it, 60 AD. What was going on? What was the context of Paul writing this to the Romans? I mean, the Romans, whether he was in Rome or not, he might have been in prison at this time. I'm not sure, but 60 AD, and he's writing this epistle to the Romans, believers who converted to and believing in Yeshua, but yet it was dominated by the Roman Empire, and soldiers everywhere. It wasn't America. It wasn't the United States of America. It was an authoritative. I mean, they had Senate, and they had some freedoms per se if you were a Roman citizen, but if you weren't a Roman citizen, you were certainly did not have the any kind of privileges. But it was still an oppressive thing. You had an emperor, and at this time, if it was 60 or so AD, it would have been Nero, I believe. I think it was Nero. I think was the emperor at that time, and it would have been crazy. They would have been fearful, because they had the Colosseum, they had the gladiator fights, they had all these different things going on. So in that context, in that picture, Paul wrote this about authorities, which is very interesting. He says in verse 1, "Let every being be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from Elohim, and the authorities that exist are appointed by Elohim."
That's the key. Because I mean, if anyone, I mean, Terry said that her son-in-law was a police officer, and they have taken serve and protect off of their cars in Amarillo, Texas. And she says,
Wow.
I asked him. Wait a minute, let me see. I asked him if they are not here to serve and protect, why are they here? And he said, they are here to collect revenue. Not all of them, but a great many of them now.
That's very
Yeah,
interesting.
you must have a calling, yeah, to actually serve and protect. That's exactly where I was going, Terry.
Wow.
Because
That's very good, Terry.
very good. Because and they did mention that just recently. They just tonight they said that there are, it is a call. I mean, there are people who are called because we know one, Dan Bongino. He's called to be a defender, a police,
Right. Yeah.
and to be a secret service. And I mean, he was really he worked very hard in that particular place of office. But they were talking about how unfortunately they had the policemen going out for tickets
Yeah.
and
Yep.
for revenue,
Right.
and
Because the city needed, or the town needed
they needed more
more
money.
money.
So they put the police there to get more revenue, and it was very disturbing um, for a lot of people because they're saying these men and women were called to, like it says right here, they were called to be appointed by Elohim to be authorities, governing authorities. And, they are governing because they are helping the social codifications of the human race that keep we need people that are there to protect. We need people to protect because unfortunately not everybody is sane.
No,
And
I
plus I was
totally
just
agree.
talking about demonic spirits. Some people are demonic and they act out, and we need people to protect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the
Now,
Father knows that.
exactly. Now, let's clarify just one thing, that these authorities that Paul is talking about are lawful
Yes.
authorities,
Yes.
not unlawful
Yeah, not like the
authorities.
one that did that to
Yeah, the George Floyd.
George Floyd.
Yeah,
No.
with that technique that he used that literally just took the breath out of him and killed him. So so we want to make a distinction. It's lawful authority, and then some go beyond that, like this policeman did, and then those three that were around him that should have, basically tackled him and just got him off of the guy. And even the crowd should have done that. I mean, because that was 8 minutes and 46 seconds that it was taking place. That's a long time. When you're doing something like that, that's a long time. It seems like a short time, but it's really a long time. And I know the policeman threatened him with mace, but and I know I'm kind of looking, hindsight is 2020, but uh, you know just in the let it be a lesson to all of us in that sense. But so they exist because Elohim appointed them, which is very interesting. It says so in verse 2, so he who opposes the authority withstands the institution of Elohim, and those who withstand shall bring judgment on themselves. I mean, that's again, powerful. Again, lawful authority. I mean, because in verse 3 it says, for those ruling are an object of fear, not to good works, but to evil. Do not wish to do you wish to not be afraid of the authority? Do the good, and you will have praise from it. Well, that's the kicker. I mean, that's one of the things that's very, very important. It's because where you find a lot of things happening, and again, this does not justify any additional beatings, whatnot. But if a person resists, then an officer is obligated, for his safety and for the safety of the people around him, to do what it takes to bring him into submission, if you will, and under control of that. Now, George Floyd was obviously a whole different case because he was already handcuffed and he was on the ground. There was no reason for that, so that was unlawful. But for those that have, that had their hands loose and maybe came running at the policeman, they certainly have the ability and the authority to control the situation as much as possible. We saw things that were out of control, not from the police standpoint, but from the rioters and the looters standpoint. If you saw some of those videos where they were, literally hailing things at a policeman and trying to take his gun. And fortunately, the policeman at least grabbed his own gun. He got up, but you could see he was like dazed and wobbly because he'd been hit by some sort of an object. We don't even know what that object was, but it was pretty big. But yet, then they fled from the situation. So that was something a little different. But you see that, and that's why I think we, on those kind of things, I mean, peaceful protests, I have no problem with peaceful. We've been at peaceful protests.
Yeah, we've been, okay, we're active. We're active regarding certain things, and we've done things in a peaceful way. But I think when these things happen, when this type of, I call it a storm that came through, this storm of people, and it really does create an awakening. There's an awakening that's taking place, and I think the major awakening has to do with the governing forces.
Yeah,
because there is a governing force that Elohim does. He's the one that does appoint it. But when man gets involved in the governing to his own reasoning, and I say this all the time about when we look at it through the human eye, the human reasoning, it can create a lot of problems.
it can.
But when we look at it through Elohim's governing, there has to be respect for human beings.
Exactly.
And there has to be, I believe, accountability. I'm not sure how much accountability is taking place within the various departments. And I'm sure every state is different. There's again, last, the Hidden Voice of Adasa, we were talking about spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
And various communities have certain spiritual warfare going on. And so that spiritual warfare demands protection. There has to be protection from chaos. That's what, from chaos. And when I see anyone who has that authority given to them by Elohim, the creator of heaven and earth,
right,
and they bow down to man as opposed to bowing down to the creator of heaven and earth. Because I know in this area that we live, I tell the police all the time, I said, I pray for you. I pray Romans 13. Do you know that you're in the Bible?
And
I tell them all the time, I say, you're in the Bible. Romans 13 has to do with your governing and your call on your life. And so they have to do what I was talking about on the Hidden Voice of Adasa, is submit to the higher authority in how they deal with people. But it's become chaotic. People have lost that sense of righteousness, that sense of responsibility of dealing with people the right way. I'm not saying everybody. There are some people who are in that position that truly take it seriously, and they like people, they like society, and they want to keep order. So
well, it's interesting too, because cities as a whole are powder kegs anyway. People are densely populated in those cities. That's what, when the COVID thing happened, the Wuhan Chinese virus happened, where did it attack really in force? Was in the cities. New York, in California, in Washington, and all these big giant cities, but because they're densely populated in there. So when things get hot and heavy, unfortunately, the fuse has been lit, and the explosion happens, and you see the bad apples of the people for something that was a good thing, of at least, and forget about the coronavirus for a second, but to protest this injustice, that was a good thing. But then the bad apples, the leftist groups, and the terrorist type of groups, and the Antifa and whatever else, and even I mean, because I've watched Black Lives Matter for a long time, and I've listened to their protests, and they're just not nice people. I'm sorry, they're just some of them maybe, but the ones that I saw were basically calling for the killing of police. It's like, really? This was years ago, a couple of years ago, and that's it's like, any group, I don't care who they are, if they're promoting something that is destructive to another human being, that is just absolutely horrific. And I will come against that in all ways. Like I said, the lives of blacks, the lives of Asians, the lives of Hispanics, the lives of Caucasian, all the lives.
The lives of white people,
well,
Caucasian. Yeah, because
matter, and the cops, and the businesses, and all these things, they matter. The babies,
because it's not because
their lives matter.
Yeah, because if we turn everybody inside out, we're all blood. We've got blood running through our veins. We're all, there is no skin color. There is no skin color. And we've come we've really, when we think about it, as far as history, we have come a long way. We've come an amazing, we've crossed many areas that we needed to cross to reach a point of compatibility, unity.
Yes.
But unfortunately, there's always those rabble rousers. There's always those people that want to create chaos, and they still are constantly harboring things that took place hundreds of years ago. And are we, and so it's to me, it grieves me. It really does grieve me when I see that kind of. But we have people that are voices, though, who are telling people, you have every opportunity to make your life better. And that's for all of us. Every single one of us has an opportunity to make his or her life better. We can do it. We can, but we have to lay aside the sensitivity, if you will. We have to lay aside that sensitivity of areas that have been very bad in the past. Very bad in the past. The racial upheavals.
We become a victim society. Everyone's against me, and I've seen it in a lot of different cases.
But the thing is,
and I understand.
I
understand the underlying conditions.
As the saying goes, have you walked in my shoes?
And we have in certain cases, but obviously not in all cases. I mean, if we could elaborate on our life, I mean, that would show something. But it's just.
Let me just say something, because I want to just say this one thing, okay? Because years ago, I worked for I was working in the public school system, and I was teaching on multicultural awareness. That was my job, to teach on multicultural awareness. I'm thankful that just came to me. And one thing that I taught, I taught children. I went all the way from kindergarten all the way up to high school. I went to different classrooms and talked about multicultural awareness.
That's right.
And then I held a huge dinner in this city, this city in Massachusetts. And I invited everybody in the city to come to this dinner. And I put on a production. I wrote a play, and I put on a production, and I had the children in the play, some of the children in the play. And the main theory, the main subject of the play was, what are you talking about around your dinner table? What are you talking about? When your children come home for dinner, What's the conversation? Is the conversation about, loving one another? Is the conversation about the Bible? Or is the conversation, does it have racial indication in there that we are turning even our children against certain people, whatever it may be? What's our conversation around the table? And actually, when they came to the dinner too, they all thought they were going to be sitting with each other. They all came, and I actually asked people to bring a dish, a multicultural dish. If they were Spanish, bring a Spanish dish or whatever. And again, this whole city, we filled up a whole gymnasium in this public school. And when they came, they thought they were going to be sitting with their friends. And I strategically placed them sitting with different people. And so the bottom line is, it was stepping on a lot of paradigms, because a lot of people didn't realize how much racial slurs they were bringing around the table and influencing their children. So that was the main objective. And as far as, how are you raising up your children? Are you raising up your children to love one another? Or are you raising your children up with your own thoughts and subjective reasoning? And so that to me, that is the main challenge, if you will. No matter where we are on the spectrum, there are still adults that are throwing people under the bus. Adults, I'm talking older people. There are some adults who have come around and said, this is wrong. I need to change my dialogue. I have been wrong. I've seen things in the wrong way. And so they've changed their attitude. And so we're still trying to work this out. We're still trying to work this out as far as, we are, the father has many children, and they come with all different races, all different tribes, if you will, and it has to do spiritually. It has to do with the condition of a person's heart. And the heart we all have the same. If we look at the actual natural heart,
Right.
the heart looks the same. So it's a condition of the heart. It has nothing to do with our skin color. It has to do with the content of our character. Our character. How do we treat people? How are we living our life? Are we seeing ourselves through the eyes of the creator of heaven and earth that created us for a purpose? And we didn't choose. None of us chose to be the color we are. We this is the color we were born with, and we didn't choose to be this color. And but we had to learn how to live with one another and to love one another.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lot from that time. Went way back. That was a lot of years ago.
How many years ago was that I taught? That was let me see,
That was like 30 something years.
It was over the. It was about. It was it was way over that.
We were married, weren't we? Oh, we were not. We weren't married at that
No,
time.
we
Oh my
weren't married
goodness.
at that time.
So it was close to
No,
about 39 years ago.
39 years ago.
Yeah,
Yes,
39 maybe.
that's when I
Wow.
went. Yeah, so
Boy, does time fly.
were you having fun?
Yeah, we have. But again, one thing I learned from that experience, because I watched AviGayle go through this whole process, and she loved it. I mean, she was in her element, as they say, because one thing that AviGayle does not have is a prejudiced bone in her body.
Mm-mm.
Nothing. I mean, it's nowhere. And what I saw her come home, and I saw some frustration because she couldn't do everything that she wanted to do because she was being stopped by certain people over in authority. We're reading about authority, so she had to submit to the authority.
But I submitted in kindness.
Yes,
I
yeah.
did submit in kindness, and I said I'm going to do good,
right,
regardless of the opposition.
Yeah, exactly. But the what I saw out of this whole thing was that AviGayle had a heart to create a solution to this issue, to this problem of racism. Of all blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians. It was a really a mixed multitude in the city that we lived in. At that time, it was like 100,000 people in that city, and it was a lot of different cultures within that city. Um, but yet, I saw the authority over her squeezing her and saying, "No, we can take it so far, but let's not take it any further than that," because I started seeing this kind of a thing, this race relations thing, as from the authorities' purposes. Now, I'm not talking about the people who really want to have harmony and unity and no and racism to go away, because we've come a long way since the 60s. There's just no two ways around that. But what I saw in the early 80s was that this was their livelihood. The authorities, the people that were, talking about racism and creating the racism issue. Was there racism? Oh, absolutely, there was. But could we have come together more and really talked about it and fellowshipped with one another, and that racism barriers, those walls would have been broken even further? Absolutely. But it was like, just go so far, and then, because we need to keep this thing, this spark going, if you will, and which was sad in my opinion. And I grew up in a different situation than AviGayle did. Grew up in a pretty white town, but I had experience of black children my age coming into our school system here in the town that we lived in, and so I got exposed to a different culture, and it was awesome. It was a good thing, and I think about these, and I think we had like maybe a dozen or so boys and girls from inner city Boston, coming, and I think of the sacrifice. I wasn't that thoughtful in those days, but I think of the sacrifice that they did. They had to get up like at 3 o'clock in the morning to get ready to go from place to place, and then to come to our school, and then they'd be home by about 7, 8 o'clock at night, and then do it all over again. The sacrifices that they made, and taking out of their element, if you will. But it ended up being a good thing for all of us, because we all learned about each other and trusted one another, and it helped a lot. Well, let's continue reading, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. That was something that I wasn't even expected to even talk about, but it came up. So it says, all right, in verse 5, therefore, it is necessary to be subject not only because of wrath, but also because of the conscience. About doing good, doing evil. I mean, if you do good, then you're going to be fine. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For they are servants of Elohim, attending continually to the duties. Render therefore to all what is due to them. Tax to whom tax is due, toll to whom toll, fear to whom fear, respect to whom respect. Owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has filled the Torah. And then he goes into it, and it's interesting. And listen to this. It says, then he repeats what you half of what you repeat every day, and we read about it. We read it, the 10 Commandments. So he repeats half of it. For this, you shall not commit adultery. That's the 7th commandment. You shall not murder. That's the 6th commandment. You shall not steal. That's the 8th commandment. You shall not bear false witness. That's the 9th commandment. You shall not covet. That's the 10th commandment. And if there be any other command, it is summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself, which is Vayikra 19, verse 18. Love does no evil to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the completion of the Torah. So up here he says, love. He who loves another has filled the Torah, and love does no evil to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the completion of the Torah. So the filled, to make full
Mm-hmm.
the Torah. And completion is the same word as a shalom, if you will. Shalom is that thing, that completion, that it's not the absence of war, it's the completion of something. So what do you think?
No, I agree. The Torah is love, and the Torah is kindness. Hallelujah. And that's the bottom line as far as as far as people. The creation. The creator of heaven and earth. And I believe that the fact that we live on this planet, and there is such a mixed multitude of people.
Mm,
And we have to guard our hearts every day concerning how we treat people.
amen.
And if we're treating people one way or another regarding, whatever, I mean, it can be many different reasons how people treat people. It's just has to be the heart. It's an issue of the heart again. It's an issue of the heart. And so we just have to be very careful. We have to be very careful about, are we bringing forth love? Are we bringing forth love, which is Torah, in our conversation? And
Always comes back to the tongue,
it
doesn't it?
does always come back to the tongue.
Wow.
Yes. And we've
Wow.
seen so much of that. I mean, and we're hearing it right now. And that's why it's such a spiritual, excuse me, it's such a spiritual situation. You know, when I was when I was a young girl, and I was probably, I'm trying to think what I was probably, let me see, I was in high school, and Martin Luther King was doing all of his marches and everything, and I was really taken by what he was doing. I was really taken. I really was captivated by that. I always seem to, gravitate to the cause type of thing. I was
Yeah, you always have been.
always
Yeah.
been a cause person. And so I've always tried to be very uh I'm contrary. I've always been contrary to the way people talk. I mean, I have had some major um battles, if you will, when people gossip. And I've had battles when people speak derogatory about certain people. And I can't reveal a lot of things right now, but I'm just saying that there's a sensitivity. I think the more you draw closer to the Father,
Mm.
and the more the Father is calling you, He's calling us to be His, His ambassador. There's going to be a sensitivity in your heart. There's going to be a sensitivity in your heart. And have you ever felt like when you're sitting in with a group of people, and you had a certain understanding about certain things? Now, number one, you love all people. You don't have any prejudice in you. You don't have any prejudice. And then you're sitting with all these people in a group, and people start talking about certain people. They don't even know them, but it's all based on appearance, one way or another. And I know many of us have had experiences like that. I know that you went to school with somebody that had some visual appearances that was not pleasing to the eye. There were people that were born with a certain visual appearance that wasn't pleasing to the eye, and people would make fun of this individual. And so, um, and there's just other, many situations we all can, identify. Well, I just remember sitting in certain circles, and people didn't know very much about me. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know a lot about me. And they would start talking about certain things that I held dear in my heart. And that I said, I have to learn how to approach these people in love, but correct them. And so I figured the best way to correct somebody is to say, you don't even know who's sitting in this conversation with you. You don't even know anything about my lifestyle. You don't know anything about my relatives. You don't know anything about anything about me. And yet because you're looking at me in the way I look, you don't know who I am. You don't know anything about me. And yet you hear what you all are saying. And so it created a bit of a stir, because, I just said, you just have to be careful about what that's why it's so important to season your conversation with love, because you just don't know whose life you may be affecting by what you're saying. You may think, well, everybody's like me. And because I'm looking at everybody around the table, everybody, we're all the same. How do you know we're all the same? You know what I'm saying? So I just think that when that's very important, that in Romans 13 that they added part of the commandments.
Yeah.
Because the key is to love your neighbor as yourself.
That's right.
And what if I was to say, do you know that I have an interracial son? And then yet people are talking about, people of color. And I'm like, you're talking about my son. He's interracial. Or when you start talking about Jewish people, oh, do you know that, my father was Jewish? And then, or you talk about whatever, or people start talking about whatever. It can be many things. And so it's not so bad to talk about it. People can have conversations about it. It's very important to have conversations, but it's what you're saying. It's what are you putting into the conversation?
Exactly.
Because you don't want to do things without kindness, without that love. Love does no evil to a neighbor.
Amen.
Love does no evil to a neighbor. And that could be conversation.
That's right.
And we saw that the other day, James, that we're listening to somebody, and somebody was talking about you don't tear people apart with your tongue. You want to build people up. You have to be very careful how you you may be so concerned about this individual that you got so passionate, and then you said things that you just don't know if those words had an effect on the person's development. So guarding our tongue is so critical. Our tongues are telling on us. It tells what's in our heart.
Amen. It certainly does. Well, in the last few minutes that we have left, I just want to, because this, you actually mentioned this. I was thinking, do you read a little bit ahead? You're not supposed to read ahead.
Okay. No, but I didn't.
No, I know.
I was speaking from my heart.
But it's it's kind of a word of knowledge, or the word of that you come in. But this is headline news. So this is something that is. I mean, all of it is applicable to us today, obviously, and we can learn from this chapter. And just see the governing authority that the Father sets up, his plan, his purpose. So it says in verse 11, and do this, knowing the time. All right, so the discerning the time, really understanding what's happening. Are we understanding what's going on today? Have we really grasped what the Spirit is doing, what as we see what is going on? Have we heard what, discerned the time that we're seeing here? So it says, and do this, knowing the time. That's very important. I just like that. I just like that 3 words, knowing the time.
Yes.
That is already, that it is already the hour for us to wake up.
Yes.
You said that earlier.
Yes.
I'm like, I mean, I can't even tease this thing. But already the hour, it it is already the hour for us to wake up from what? From sleep. All right. For now, our deliverance is nearer than when we did believe. That is so good. When I've read this again, I'm like, wow, I forgot all that was actually in there. And do this, knowing the time, that it is already the hour for us to wake up from sleep. For now, our deliverance is nearer than when we did believe. Again, that word deliverance could be translated as Yeshua, our Redeemer. Him coming back, the bridegroom coming back for the bride, is nearer now than when we first believed. Now I know that sounds like, oh, that sounds very elementary. No, but we, do we keep our expectors on? Do we keep looking up for our redemption draws near? Are we constantly talking about that? Are we constantly saying our king, our bridegroom is coming back for all of us, for his bride, so that we can rule and reign in his kingdom where the king is, here on this beautiful earth, restored, purified, cleansed for his glory, for his kingdom? Wow, I'm telling you. If you didn't do a backflip, you missed it, but that's all right. You can do another backflip, but if you do a backflip, just by all means, be careful and do it. Maybe do it on your bed. All right, so that'll be good. The night is far advanced; the day has come near. So let us put off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Wow. Let us walk becomingly as in the day, not in wild parties and drunkenness, not in living together and indecencies, not in fighting and envy, but put on the Master Yeshua Messiah and make no provision for the lusts of the flesh.
Yes. Yes.
That is powerful.
Yes.
That is a very, very powerful chapter. It's just something that we can certainly chew on and really say, Father, how does this apply to us today?
The thing is, if you really dwell on the lusts of the flesh, it goes back to Romans 8. If you walk after the flesh,
yes,
it's death. If you walk after the spirit, it's life.
That's right.
And so we have to be, again, sensitive to that. We live in this flesh. We live in this fleshly body, but we're called to walk after the spirit and walk after the light. Walk towards the light and after the spirit. And that is so hard for all of us because we always think that the flesh, man looks at the outer, but the Father looks at the heart.
That's right.
And that's the key. He's looking at our hearts. Man looks at the outer. They'll look at the outer and admire what they see on the outer, but the Father's looking at our heart. He and what's coming out of our heart is coming off of our tongue. Our tongues are telling on what's in our heart. And so I'm telling you, I love it because each and every one of us are in need of examining and doing an audit on our own life.
Amen. And obviously, this is, Ephesians, you talk about putting, put off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light.
Yeah, I read all about the.
Did you read that one?
Yeah,
with the wrestling against the flesh and
yeah,
blood.
I read that whole thing.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
in
that is,
Hadassah.
that is just so the armor that Paul is talking about in Ephesians is the same armor of light that he's talking about here in Romans, and that's what you're putting on when you put on his armor.
Which is his word.
Which is his word.
His word is light.
Yes.
And the spirit.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it has to do with the word, and it has to, it's. I was saying that you have to hide his word in our heart. We have to meditate on his word, and we have to sing his word and pray his word, and it's an amazing lifestyle. I love it.
Amen. That was good. I enjoyed that.
Yes.
I enjoyed that. I hope you all enjoyed that. And I hope it not just enjoyed it. I mean, I hope it meant something to you and it spoke to your spirits. And because I know it did for us. I mean, it really just helped us a great deal in looking at what's going on today and putting on that armor of light, getting out of the darkness that is permeating this land and all that. But he is so good. He is so good to us, and
Yes,
it's
he
awesome.
is.
So I think that's about. I think that's enough. I really think that's enough. So
Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, really. Thank you, everyone.
Your input was phenomenal.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Joe and Terry and
Marie.
Marie
was here.
Yes,
Hallelujah.
Yes. And Anna.
And Anna. Yes.
So we appreciate all you being here and being in the encouragement room, and everyone else that may be listening, whether it's live or you're listening to this later. But make sure you like the video and make sure you share these videos with people that you might think that know it, might need to know what we're talking about. But on social media, you just never know who might hear these words and come to the salvation knowledge and understanding of Yeshua and as their Redeemer, and get some great things in their lives. And and we just thank the Father for Messianic Lamb Network for what he is doing through this ministry of Mark and Adina Smith, and we appreciate them very, very much. And we just appreciate all of you, our watchers, our listeners, people that partake in these. So, all right. So we are Israel, my delight. Until next week, what do we have coming up? We have. What am I doing? What do we have coming up? We have. Torah study among friends.
Yes, hallelujah.
At 2 p.m. on Shabbat.
Yes.
So join us 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Shabbat. We have War Room Prayers.
And Jamie Louie's with us.
Jamie Louie, and he's with us on Torah study among friends, and also Let Us Reason together on Sunday. So, and go to MessianicLambRadio.com, MessianicLambRadio.com. Give if you can. That would be a blessing to this network, this ministry, and just we appreciate every one of you. So until we see each other again, shalom, shalom. And this is my life, James O'Hare and AviGayle O'Hare.
Hallelujah. Love you all. Shalom aleichem.
Shalom.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.